We have identified there's a type of business that we like to acquire. Usually, these are founder run companies. It's an older founder that's looking to retire. Almost 90% of them we have worked with in some capacity. So there's a trust factor. The founder wants to retire and they're looking for a nice home for their employees. Oftentimes, that's a very important part of it. Oftentimes, these founders are tired, so some of them actually end up working with us for a couple of years afterwards because now they have the freedom to actually go out and sell. A lot of them were sellers that ended up building these nice businesses. They got bogged down by payroll and leases and all those things that free them from. As a founder and CEO myself, it's an easy conversation to have. And we have a track record where we have kept on most of the employees as well. So they realize it's not just somebody coming in to gut the company down to the bones just for profit.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Practical Founders Podcast, where every week we hear an amazing story from a serious founder who built a valuable software company and did it without big funding. I'm your host, Greg Head, and this week my guest is Ajay Gupta, the founder and CEO of Starista. Starista is a marketing technology, data, software, ad tech, connected TV, targeted marketing software data and services company that helps big companies target better in the digital marketing universe, which of course is changing every year with between regulations and what big companies want and where they can add value. He's a bootstrap founder based in San Antonio, Texas, that has built a very big company. He's been acquiring companies to build out his solutions and his team and has over 250 employees. He raised a little growth equity funding along the way, but has built a large company, over 100 million in revenues, with very efficient funding, profitable almost the whole way over 15 years and still going with AI and still growing. So it's a great practical founder story, a little different twist with marketing data and technology. Hi, Ajay. Welcome to the Practical Founders Podcast.
Hey, Greg, very happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks for sharing your story. It's an interesting one. The data game in sales and marketing and modern marketing for bigger companies now, and a bootstrapped startup journey with Starista. You're in San Antonio, is that right, today?
I am, yes, San Antonio, Texas.
Yeah. We had scheduled the podcast a couple of weeks ago, and you had tornadoes and floods and all that Texas storm there, right? So the usual suspects here. Did everything turn out okay for you and your team?
Yeah, one of the things I normally like about San Antonio is that even though it gets really hot, usually besides flood, we don't have too many natural issues here, but the tornado was certainly a surprise to us, and we lost Wi-Fi, so we had to move the podcast.
Well, the modern inconveniences, we lost Wi-Fi, could have
Yep.
been worse and all of that. So yeah, the wonderful Texas weather and the crazy storms that, changes that happen, just like in the startup world. Ajay, let's start with Starista here, your company. What is Starista these days? How big is it? Who do you serve? We'll go into the details and then we'll go back to your journey. But what is Starista now?
I have been trying to explain to my parents exactly what I do for several years now. And, the best explanation I have come up with is we help other brands find new customers. So that's probably the simplest way to describe what we do. And to get a little bit more granular than that, we help other brands by using CTV and email, but really our data is sort of the secret sauce that helps us identify, find, and target the ideal customers for these brands.
And CTV is what?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yes, I tried to tell my sales team not to use too many acronyms, and I just did it here. So connected TV. So historically, everything has been watched on cable, but as we're moving towards all of the various streaming channels and platforms, it's the ads that get placed on these
Yeah.
platforms. That's kind of where we want to reach people where they're watching these shows or even free TV on their LG or Samsung TV sets.
So you do both email and CTV. That's ad tech. I don't know if you're part of the whole ad tech
Right.
community there, the big community, but you're in the data game, and I know you have some software as well. We'll talk more about your solutions. Who do you primarily sell to these days? Are these very large consumer brands that we would recognize or B2B brands? Yeah, who are you selling to?
Yeah, so it's interesting. We have our top clients are household names that you would know. But the way we look at it is we can help anyone that has first party data. So that's typically customer data. So think about kind of your brick and retail stores or online stores that are collecting your first name, last name, mailing address, that sort of information. Those that's where it's kind of our sweet spot. We could help CPG companies, so brands that get sold on in grocery stores, but typically not our sweet spot. Usually, it's going to be companies that are collecting a lot of customer data. And the reason for that is we usually look at what are people buying currently from these stores or online websites and help find more people like that. So having
Ah,
kind of that base data set gives us more value in terms of being able to help them really understand where they're doing well and also a lot of times where they're not doing well and where they should go after.
right. So the ad tech game is huge. The consumer and B2B data game is huge, and you do a very specific thing these days in
Right.
this. I don't know if you'd say it's a crowded market. It's a very big one, very well
Right.
funded, lots of big companies out there, and you've grown a pretty big company. How big is Starista these days? What can you say about
So,
the size?
we just recently closed acquisition of Alesco Data in Florida, a data company. So we are actually, I was looking at the Slack channel right before this. We're up to 270 people, and I think about 250 of them are full time and 20 part time. So
Yeah.
it's huge for company that started with two people. So it's been quite a remarkable journey that we have undertaken here.
Yeah, and you raised a little growth equity funding, some scale funding, I guess you'd
Right.
say, practical on the practical side, not venture funding, and you're not trying to go public, but you raised some funding along the way. What can you say about that?
Yes, so surprisingly for a company our size, we've only ever done one round of roughly 14 million through Wavecrest Growth Partners. And surprising because generally at our stage, you've raised multiple rounds, and we went almost 10 years bootstrap before we even decided to raise capital. And one of the reasons we did it was to expedite growth through M&A,
Yeah.
which we've done very successfully over the last 5 years. But yeah, our path more or less has been trying to keep the company profitable and using those profits to then improve products, do M&A, and that sort of thing. But we did use the Wavecrest round to
Yeah.
expedite some of these things.
Yes. So we know Deepak Sindwani from Wavecrest Growth. I've known him for not quite 20 years yet, but he's been on the podcast a few times talking about
Oh,
the kinds of founders that he backs, and it's a very practical kind of approach. You were bootstrapped and profitable, and
right.
weren't trying to do the VC funded drunken funding thing, but you saw an expansion opportunity. And I know Deepak has a lot of experience in the data
Right.
markets and can be, I guess, a little helpful to you, at least understand it. It's a little different
Right.
than the traditional vertical B2B SaaS there. So if you have 250 employees, you're profitable and growing, does that mean you didn't say, but your company's probably over 100 million in revenue, maybe well over that?
Yeah, so we are a little bit this year we're going to be a little bit over 100 million, so that was kind of
Okay.
the number we were striving for in the last 12 months. And with the most recent acquisition, we're going to be over that number. So,
Okay. So we'll talk about this journey and like most founders, when they get to 5 or 10 or 20 million and they've done too many hard things, they say, all right, it's time for somebody else to take over. And, but you're going long with this thing. And we'll talk about what you're thinking about that. You're growing a sizable company. Jay, do you have to have a sizable company to compete in this market and compete with the big guys? Or is it just having the scale or the
Yeah.
sophistication to be able to solve problems?
I think uh, a large part of our revenue is data, or at least we deal with data in every aspect of even the ad tech aspects of our business. And reason for that is we are not a pure ad tech company. Companies that are using us to buy media are generally doing it because they really want targeted audiences to go with that media. So instead of using a traditional media buying platform, they're using Starista for reaching very specific niche audiences. And because of that, and kind of this growing bureaucracy of consumer laws and privacy, a lot of things that are done by
Oh my
often by
gosh.
trial attorneys rather than to safeguard consumer privacy, you almost need a certain amount of scale now to be able to be competitive because you have to comply with so many different state laws and regulations. So there's, most people are surprised there's very little federal oversight. So that
Oh my
means
goodness.
that every state is able to kind of make random law that goes into effect. And that means you have a lot of attorney bills just to meet basic compliances. So unfortunately, when I started the company, you could get away with being small and nimble, but I think there's a barrier to entry is unfortunately higher today because of some of the privacy regulations that have come up that really require more attorneys and paperwork than any meaningful advances. So,
Yes. Well, the data game has a ton of regulation. California just enacting new
right.
regulation for website and the third-party cookies that we all went through, and privacy laws and social media and so forth. So there's a lot of complexity there. Jay, do you have customers across North America, Mexico, and Canada, or around the world, or is it primarily a U.S. data and a U.S. customer game?
Yeah, so our customers can be from anywhere in the world. The difference is probably that we primarily serve the US market in the sense that we advertise only within US. So that means, if somebody from Japan is trying to launch a product in US, that we can help with. But if a Japanese company is trying to market in Japan or Europe, that unfortunately we cannot help with because we have decided that it is too difficult. It's difficult enough to comply with US regulations. And when you go outside of that, it becomes very difficult to provide the same quality and of service across the world. But yeah, we have clients from everywhere, but it's
Yes.
primarily focused on US product launches. So.
Now, do you have peer marketing data and services companies that specialize targeting in Europe and other parts of the world that have, kind of fit the same niche, but do it in a different landscape?
I would say the US market, in terms of the data and connected TV and digital media, is at a higher, more advanced plane than some of the other countries are.
Okay,
And also, the markets are a little bit different. So, for example, we do have an office in India. One of the most frequent ways in which companies market in India is through text messaging or
sure.
SMS marketing, as they call it. And that's something that's not been done in US really ever successfully because of the you really can't send unsolicited text
Right.
messages. But in India, it's a surprise when I'm there, or turn on my Indian phone. This is nothing but advertising coming through. So it's different by the country, but I would say overall, the US market, especially when it comes to data and how much data is available, how accurate the data is by far ahead of most countries.
And it's a large funded companies. It serves national brands, very large companies, a lot of public companies, all of that. you have to comply with all of the regulations and help them comply. Spam and SMS communications, it's very highly regulated, privacy and so forth. So you probably have a very high standard for all of this compared to probably other parts of the world.
Yeah, and because, in some ways, we're almost, 3 different companies in one. We have the
Okay.
ad tech side, then we have the data side, and then the email side is almost like a MarTech side to it
Yeah.
as well. So it's almost a compliance at 3 different levels, and sometimes, even within large orgs, we're, going through 3 different privacy reviews based on
Yeah.
what they're sharing with us, and especially when we start handling first party data for a publicly traded Fortune 500
Very
company.
sensitive. Right.
The barrier of entry for that is quite tremendous. So,
Right.
one of the things we did 5 years ago was bring in a CTO from Integral Ad Science, which is a publicly traded company itself. And a lot of people are like, "Hey, is Starista big enough?" Especially when we brought him in, we were about 100 people. But we like to kind of think ahead and bring in people that have worked at that level to upgrade our own way of thinking, as well as obviously the infrastructure. So we are in compliance at the highest levels or ahead of the game for the size we are at.
Well, you've built a bigger company here, and it's going to get bigger, and you've got to have the infrastructure to do that. And show me a 100 million revenue software company that isn't multi-region. I'll show you they're multi-product, right? You've got to spread out and
Right.
expand and cross sell and reach new markets. Did you expand those product lines primarily through acquisition and then growing it from there, or did you tuck in functionality around the your
Yeah,
product line?
that's a great question. So, as we started, let me back up here. When we started the company, and the name actually itself, Starista, comes from my desire to be kind of a multicultural marketing company. So we were thinking of stirring of cultures. That was kind
Mhm.
of my brainstorming process. So came up with Starista, and since then we expanded into really multicultural is where we started, but really we expanded into general marketing and general data marketing specifically, and that was great. And then we realized that there is a barrier to growing because most data companies outside of maybe, say, Epsilon and Axiom of the world, even at that point, were quite small. Most of them were, 10 people, 20 people, maybe 40, 50 tops. And a reason for that is a lot of the companies, all they were doing was licensing data to
Yes,
bigger
bringing data. Yeah.
bigger
Uh-huh.
data companies, right? So nobody from, like, for example, Home Depot is not out there looking to license data. They really are looking for more services and who can help enhance their customer data. They have enough guys to do their modeling and all of those things, right? So we kept running into kind of like a limit of what we could sell, and that's when I realized that people need more than just raw data. You really need a data science team, and not every company, even large ones, have that data science team to be able to handle raw data. So we started building this activation layer. So the media buying platform was an acquisition we did. And then the ESP was partially built in-house, partially we acquired the code for
So
it.
email
So
service provider to send your own emails from
correct, right.
yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. And the customer data platform we built in-house, but then we acquired a company that was doing it more managed service to put those clients on the platform. So it's been a mixture of
Yeah.
kind of buys that I'd say people don't traditionally associate with data companies, but our goal was really how do we build out a complete solution set where a CMO could bring data, first party data, put it on our platform, be able to search it, and then activate on it. So could they take action directly? Because one of the challenges that happens is people are very specific in terms of if you're using a media buying platform, they just buy media, so you can't send any emails from a DSP typically, right?
Yes.
So
Right.
then you have to track 7 different things on 7 different platforms. And we're not quite there where we have every single service available, but that was kind of the overarching goal, and we've been successful in bringing a lot of these various services under one single platform.
So you've grown out as an all-in-one, all the acronyms, DSPs and ESPs and CDNs and yes,
Yeah.
all that stuff. So that's great. So do you sell to CMOs or the data people in these large marketing organizations, or who is a
Yeah,
typical
so,
buyer?
depending on the company, CMO, head of digital marketing, those 2 are probably the most frequent.
Yeah.
If a company has a pure data licensing or data science team department, it'll be the
Mhm.
chief data officer or VP of data solutions that we go after. But yeah, outside of that, it's really for mid-size to smaller companies. It could even be the CEO. That's a good starting point. But we have learned starting at the top is usually the best way to make a big enough sale.
This podcast is sponsored by Fullscale. Fullscale gives you dedicated senior engineers in the Philippines who are vetted, employed, and supported by Fullscale. They integrate directly with your team so you can move fast and scale in days, not months. They have over 300 active engineers with a 95% retention rate who are trusted by companies across SaaS, fintech, healthcare, and enterprise. Fullscale founder Matt Watson joined us twice on this podcast to talk about his previous practical SaaS founder exits and how AI is changing product development right now. Head to fullscale.io/product driven for a free copy of his best selling book, Product Driven, with practical strategies to stop wasting dev cycles and build products customers actually love. Now back to the show. There's a lot of ways that they could do it. What is your main proposition these days? I know you have older
Right.
customers, newer customers, different segments of customers that use different products, but you have the ways to connect across these the best to do the most specific targeting that creates the most efficient marketing, or what would you say
Yeah,
in
so
general terms for us? Yeah.
our hypothesis is this. If we know exactly who you are going after, we can build the ideal customer profile for you. And from there, we have the ability to target the same audience over across all of these
Okay.
platforms. The difference is when you're using different platforms or different companies, and even though you're saying maybe you're targeting Greg Head, the Greg Head targeting in one platform to another can be very different, and it could be completely different people with the same name. But by being able to use a single platform, we can really control, okay, we want to send 6 emails to this person and 24 display impressions and 37 connected TV ads. So
Wow.
by being that granular, and then we can also take those audiences, and if you want to go more traditional like Google or Facebook, you're still using our audience to target.
Okay.
So that's kind of the a big value proposition is really being able to double down, triple down on these audiences over and over across channels.
Right,
And
if you take any large, company, I don't know, an HVAC sells, I saw
right,
Carrier on their logo, right? So they sell air conditioner equipment and things like that. Maybe it's B2C, maybe it's B2B, but if you do an ad other than a pay-per-click ad, it just kinda blankets everybody, right?
right,
And it goes
yep,
after everybody. But what if you could
yeah,
just target not the 10% of those that would be likely, but the 1% of those that fit your current ICP, right? And not
right.
spread it to the other 99%. It's a version of what you're saying there.
Yeah, and I'll give you one practical example. So one of our big clients is a large haircut salon chain. And these are kind of discounted haircuts, so for a long time they've been
Super.
discounting haircuts, and they're say it's a coupon for $9 or $10, and you get these things in mail, direct mail all the time. You see ads for it. So one of the interesting things we did for them almost 6, 7 years ago was we realized that they were discounting for no good reason. So the reason for that is people that were loyal customers were going to come back to them whether or not they got the discount, right?
Yes.
However, they could get new customers by sending heavy discounts to them. So we kind of took a reverse approach, and we started not giving discounts, but just
Uh-huh.
branding information to the most loyal customers, and focused much more on people that come there when they needed a discount, or people that weren't coming there or going to a rival haircut salon. So it's a good use of both data and activation, where they actually love this model. And so discounting and couponing is not always the best, even though it sounds like, it's a great idea to send everyone a discount. So.
Do you have a performance-based value proposition and pricing, or is it, you can buy data, you can buy application access and so forth? You're not How are you priced selling to these complicated enterprises?
Yeah, so there is generally going to be a baseline data fee for it, and that's usually the SaaS part of our business is the data licensing fee.
Okay.
The second part of it is more variable based on how many emails or how many impressions or connected TV spots we're buying. And I would say it's much more based on, in a way, everything is based on performance, but that's not how it's priced, really. What that means
Okay.
is, regardless of how we price it, the brand is going to always look at how many people actually signed up or converted, or
Yes, of
in the
course.
back
Right.
end, right? So our price is our price, but I think what we focus on is working with the brand to track how many incremental customers we were able to get them. And at the end of the
Yeah.
day, if they're going to continue working with us, it's because we're getting them enough incremental customers at a price point that makes
Yeah.
sense. But our price point is
That's excellent.
generally, there's kind of the fixed based fee for data analytics, and then on top of it, a variable cost. And that's where companies have to decide how much they're going to spend, because especially when it comes to media buying, a large majority of that budget actually is going to publishers where we're buying that media.
So you have a little media business in there too, right? You're passing
We
that
do.
through, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's a lot going on for a big company. You got a lot of irons in the fire. And I was looking at your website. You have a lot of VPs and senior VPs, fill the whole page of this. You got a really big team in doing this. Ajay, how did you start this thing? You know, in San Antonio. I know you're not from there, but
Yeah.
like, how did this thing get going? This is part of the crazy founder story. I'm sure there was a bunch of crazy years in there, but
Yeah.
how and why did you start this darn thing?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I was in grad school at Texas State. And during that time, Hillary Clinton was running for president against Barack Obama for the Democratic nomination. And I was always interested in politics, and one of my close friends was working on the Clinton campaign. And if you remember, Hillary was supposed to win that election easily,
Uh-huh.
and no one had quite thought that, of all places, Texas would become a battleground for her to survive in that race. So during that time, I ended up working for the campaign while I was in grad school part time, and learned about this whole world with targeting and micro targeting, and all of that was even new in the political world at that point. People
Well, that
talk a
was the
lot
first
about.
wave of digital. I think David Axelrod and the
Exactly.
Facebook guy that came in
Yep.
and, I think for
Yep.
Obama and used social media in
Right.
clever ways, I would say,
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah, so no, Obama's campaign was definitely a little bit ahead at that point. So Hillary's campaign was making great strides and kind of led to this micro targeting wars almost.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And so that was my first exposure. I was in the same room as Bill Clinton a lot of times,
Wow.
met
Is it
Hillary.
because you were technical about this, or what was your superpower, at the time?
I had my superpower, I would say, was when I was a teenager. Well, I moved to US from India when I was a teenager, and during that time in the late 90s, internet was a fairly new
Okay.
thing still. People could make websites and become somewhat of internet celebrities almost. But I had a professional wrestling website because I was a teenager and a big WWF, WCW fan. And which was, mostly it was family and friends reading it, but somewhat overnight. Alta Vista, and this is where I'm dating myself. When
Right.
you
Uh-huh.
searched Alta Vista for pro wrestling, my website started showing up number two. And all of a sudden, it went from 10 people, family and friends reading it a day, to about 50,000 people reading it. So, as I was a teenager, I kind of learned very early on how to market. And all of a sudden, this was even before there were automated media buying happening. So, I was
Yeah.
selling banner ads on
Of course,
website
right.
for X $500, $1,000, and as a high school kid, it was very exciting, and then continued to do that in college. So I had a little bit of experience in the digital world,
Okay.
probably faster and sooner than most people did at my age. So I
Yeah.
guess if I had a superpower, it was just being at the right place, right time. And Clinton campaign was looking
Yeah.
for people with digital experience, which at that point, there
Yeah.
weren't that many of us. So
There weren't that many. There was a lot of people who did the traditional thing. My dad was an ad guy in Chicago in the
right.
'60s, '70s, '80s, all of that, and that was pre-digital, all of that, and then there was the beginnings of digital, and it wasn't very sophisticated. All this analytics and,
Yep.
Google search and ad tech really hadn't scaled up then, so you were on the frontier building some things
Yep.
and learning about segmentation and audiences and clicking and conversions and, doing all that stuff, so I'm sure you had plenty to say about that. Did you study this in university or was
I actually
this kind
didn't.
of
So
thing?
much like any teenager, I kind of, at that point, I decided to be a computer science major. But then I realized what I was doing with web design and all of those things weren't actually being taught in college at that point. It was, much
Mm,
more C sharp and
yes,
Java. And then I kind
yes,
of lost
uh-huh,
interest. So I'd say I was more self taught. So I ended up with a eclectic set of majors.
okay, there you go. Yeah,
Economics and creative writing. So
okay,
it's kind of
alright, good.
yeah,
The liberal arts side of things. I have an
yeah,
economics
yeah,
degree
yeah.
myself, among others. What was the initial proposition when you started this? It was a different time. You were a small team,
Yep.
bootstrap. What was the thing that got you moving fast?
So our initial proposition was around. So one of the things I did on the campaign side was figuring out how do you target certain multicultural audiences. So in this
What
case,
and
we were
what does that mean? Does that mean Latinos in the North
so in
America?
this specific case, it meant targeting Hispanics and Asian Americans for the
Okay,
Clinton campaign.
okay.
And that meant I was one of the things with politics is you get really passionate and really, you know, uh, as part of the campaign, you feel like you're part of a broader movement, but it also means you get very emotional, and when your candidate loses, it's a traumatic experience. So one of the things I was thinking of was, hey, I don't want to keep moving for campaigns every 2 years, and that's the life of a lot
Right,
of the political consultants. So I wanted to kind of take what I had learned and apply it to the corporate world. So what that meant was going after, say, a dish network that has foreign language channels. So Dish Network, for example, has a lot of Indian language channels
yeah,
and they have subscribers, but they didn't know who. spoke a second language that they could go after. So one of the first products we did was how do we identify somebody who speaks a second language and targeting them in their CRM databases.
And how did you
So
do that? Little company, I mean, modern data people would scrape data and
yep.
buy data and combine data and, probably be a little unseemly about where they get their data and, enrich their data. But like, where were you getting data about this back then?
So it was all based on probability. So what we did was literally scan in baby book names. So cultural baby book names. We
Oh my goodness.
found on
Okay. Right.
found this was when I
Yeah.
bet this stuff is available online now, but back in the day you had to use kind of buy books from eBay.
Books.
So,
Yes.
Egyptian first names for babies and
Mhm.
stuff. So you start we literally identified almost 100,000 first names, 500,000 last names with cultural affiliations and various probabilities. So, for example, a female first name that's culturally specific with a different cultural last name. We're probably assuming she married somebody of a different culture.
Yeah.
So there were quite a
Mhm.
few inferences we made, and
Okay. Yeah.
yeah. So it took, but I should say none of this was very easy. And in fact, it took 107 sales calls to make a sale. And my goal when I started was I was going to do 100 sales call. And if we didn't make a sale, I'll fulfill my parents'
That's
wishes of
classic.
doing an
Right.
MBA at some point.
Yes, of course.
Uh,
Uh-huh.
so I was kind of reaching towards the end of my ability to do this and live on ramen and Panda Express. But luckily, our first big client was Dish Network, and
Yeah.
we did all of the cultural segmentation for them. And still remember they offered $100,000 for the project, and I was like, "Yes, yes, I
Yes.
can eat a meal now." So
Yeah. And was that email data that you somehow collected and
this
associated?
was actually just taking their CRM database and enriching it with all sorts of
I see.
cultural
Okay.
attributes. Yeah.
Okay. Right. So that's really interesting. So you wanted to create a tech company here. You saw this opportunity,
Yep.
right? You didn't want to be computer science. You didn't want to be an engineer, doctor, whatever. You saw
Correct.
this creative opportunity, and you knew this wave was coming. You saw it in
Right.
the campaigns. It was true, and you could see the future there, and you
Right.
were playing with it. How long did it take you to get to 1,000,000 in revenue? And I'm sure you had a little bit more team there and maybe ran around differently.
Yeah, good question. So, the first year was really just the product development. So, we were really at zero
Who was
revenue.
we? You and a team or what?
Yeah. So, since we could not, or I could not afford engineers in US, and my coding skills was, I would say I'm a
Yeah,
mediocre coder at best. Ended up hiring three guys in India, and actually all three of them are still with us to this day, right out of college,
yeah,
and found them to be kind of like part of this team. And yeah, so they were really me in US and three guys in India.
okay.
And then my wife was a web designer and graphic designer, so she was kind of doing the marketing end of things.
Yeah,
So
okay.
that was kind of the team originally. So
So that was about 2010 and 2011 and keep
yep,
growing from there,
yeah.
and
So it took us about 3 years to get to $1 million. So
okay, that's pretty sizable,
yeah.
and did you think you were onto somebody? Did you onto something? Did you know what you were building at the time?
One of the things is I have kind of usually set goals, especially in the early days. I wasn't setting $100 million goal. It was let's get to 1 million somehow, and
Okay,
we'll
yeah, of
go
course.
bigger.
Yeah,
So we were setting kind of small goals, and that's kind of what we did it. But if you had asked me at that point, would this be $100 million company? I would have said You must be crazy. There is no way there's
That's a
$100 million market
practical
here."
founder statement there. Like, you have to declare yourself, "This will be a billion-dollar company someday," when you raise big VC funding, but
Right.
we can see how it goes, and if things
Yeah.
change, we can move around and backtrack
Right.
or do what we need to do and all of
Yeah.
that. So,
But
as
I
it
will
grew
say,
go ahead.
yeah, I will say as we got closer to probably about 20 million in revenue, that's when,
Ah,
started thinking, okay, this could be 100, $200 million company if we kept
okay.
growing at this rate. So,
Okay, so that's a pretty big jump. You jumped over most practical founders who are listening here, right? Who might have gotten to 1,000,000. This MarTech, ad tech, data game with in the digital marketing universe with all the regulations is constantly changing, right? And
right.
so whatever, I work with founders that have been doing about the same thing for 10 years for their vertical market, right? And it keeps getting better, bigger, and so forth. But in between 1 and 20, did you have some major pivots to and adjustments, or was it just more of the same kind of, cultural targeting?
No, we do a lot of pivots. So I think one of the more practical things I have learned, as well as I've seen the people I've hired, the people that I think grow with a startup are generally people that are not, uh, or I should say that people are generally flexible, are the ones that grow. A lot of times, people can be very hardworking, but if they are unwilling to see what the client wants, it's difficult to grow the company. So
Ah,
a good example is, a lot of people on our board say we should create repetitive products that we can sell over and over, which is classic kind of SaaS model
yeah, okay,
of
right.
growing things, right? But the issue is that we're not a pure SaaS company. So there is also kind of that activation aspect to our business. And on top of that, not every data file we cut is the same. So, what I mean by that is we may have internally 700 points of data available about somebody, and we don't advertise it because the marketing collateral may only have 20 of those that are
Mhm.
most frequently used. But you have to be flexible enough where if a Fortune 10 company wants something and you have it,
Oh, there we
you
go, right.
you
Yeah,
need to both hear it as well as think, do we change our product because we're hearing this over and over. And so I think one of the things that I try to do is be flexible myself, but also hire people that have the same mindset that are hearing what the clients want. So a good example is, so cultural marketing also had, we realized it was great for the companies that wanted it, but a lot of people wanted something a little bit more, or even the ones that were doing cultural marketing. So the next thing was, hey, can we do email targeting? And we
mm,
did not have a ESP, or we didn't have the ability to send emails at that time. So we tried partnering with a few companies and realized it's very difficult to kind of make it work just on a partnership. So the idea of email came literally from clients asking us
yeah,
like, "Hey, this is great. You can identify Indian Americans, but can you also send out an email to them?" So we heard enough of it where we were like, "Hey, we should build something or learn how to do this in house."
yeah.
And so I think for me, it's very important to hear what the clients are saying and not be stubborn. So.
Were you always selling to larger companies who would tend to have their own unique needs and complex perspectives and, "I'll pay for this, but not for the standard thing." Was it always big companies, or did you move up market as you grew?
So this is kind of a funny story, but the reason why we started selling to big companies is there was a company called Jigsaw that Dun
Oh, I
and
remember.
Bradstreet later acquired,
Yeah,
and
uh-huh.
what they did was sell these contact records for $1 each. But you could also buy contacts if you shared your
Yes.
contacts
Yeah.
in
Yeah, I remember that
to
one.
the database. But the thing was, because they were only selling contacts with B2B domains and most of them big companies, the initial set of targeting that I did was quite large companies. So the 100 companies were practically all like top, probably the top 500 companies in the
Mhm.
world. So yes, we kind of have always targeted the bigger companies, but that was because, at least initially and even now, it's easier to reach the bigger companies because the
Yeah.
email addresses are much more easily available. So for
Oh,
practical
that's
reasons,
interesting. I
we
thought
do
you were
that.
gonna say they understand the complexities of digital and they have all these teams. No, you're actually saying they were easy to get on the phone.
They were easier to get on the phone, which is a odd thing to say, but
Yeah, no, that's
also,
funny.
uh,
Yeah, no,
also
that's
very
right.
true in our case. Yeah.
But every year, probably in this, regulations change and demands change and their platforms change and the digital front end of the landscape changes. Does that mean it's kind of every few years you are, adding and shifting and listening to your customers and adapting, I guess you'd say?
Yeah, and I think, look, I think some of the regulations can be solved with more paperwork and more kind of these fine text added to emails. So we
Yeah.
work with a lot of telecom companies. So I couldn't
Okay.
tell you the number of times they stop email campaigns that their marketing has approved, where we hear, no, 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 hold on, we need to edit the legal language slowly, and it
Yeah.
happens frequently, right? But in kind of like looking at it from a macro picture, there are certainly, we had plans to, for example, go into Europe right before GDPR, and
Right.
we decided it would not be worth it because our barrier was going to be very high without a European presence to make that happen. So, yes, I think both in terms of what we can do and can't do. Another one, a good example is location data. You know,
That,
is it become quite toxic, and we never really were in this space, but it was probably a product that made up less than 1% of our revenue that used some location data, but we got out of it before it even got toxic because it just wasn't
okay.
worth it for us. So, being able to kind of also tell what data sets are going to be difficult to sustain over a period of time is important, because a
Yeah.
lot of the product strategy then has to be based on what is widely used, acceptable, and what's been like, for example, what house you buy or what your house value is, what your political affiliation is. These things have been public record for, a couple of decades
Yes.
now, so very kind of safe data points.
So it's, you're selling marketing insights and actions, targeting and leverage, but it sounds like kind of a sales led approach, right? You have solutions oriented, sophisticated frontline salespeople that help co create, and solve
Right.
a problem. And do you have consultants and people that'll help you dig through it if you don't have your team? Do you get into the services game to help, put together campaigns and things like that?
Say by and large, we're generally focused on bringing in salespeople that are solution sellers. So
Okay.
understanding the specific problem for a client and then positioning our product is usually the way we have approached it, because some things we do, like the platform, is easy to show and for
Okay.
somebody to conceptualize, right? But selling data is very, very difficult because there's no demo to really show somebody. It's you're staring at a SQL
I swear
data
it'll
set,
work. Right. Yeah.
right? So it's not
Yeah.
interesting. It's the guys that would be interested in it or find it interesting are data scientists, but they're usually not the ones that can buy the data set.
Right.
So you
Yeah.
really are presenting a picture or painting a picture almost
Yeah.
of a solution to somebody, and that's a difficult thing to do.
Right.
So oftentimes, we are hiring very experienced sellers that are that you if you talk to you. The way we look for it is they shouldn't even sound like salespeople because they're really not
Yes.
salespeople. They're solution
Yeah.
architects. So.
Okay. Great. Well, you grew this company up and it was profitable. I guess you could have sold it, Ajay. You could have sold the company and walked away with a pile of money and waved to all the family and friends who said, I thought you were crazy all those years," or something like that. But instead, I don't know if you looked for funding to start expanding
Yeah,
your product line and things like that, but you work with the team at Wavecrest Growth. It's growth equity. They're it's not about private equity extracting value
right.
and profits and debt and all that. It's about, building a much more valuable company, which you've done. Why did you do that as opposed to raise funding or sell the company? Practical founders out there are, hear about growth equity and they have a profitable company and wonder why I should do this. But
Yeah.
briefly, what was your logic behind that?
Yeah. So, I had never been uh, in a structured company environment, having worked with political campaigns before. So a lot of things, obviously, I'm learning on the job,
Hmm.
and I tell my team, look, I've never run a 250-person company before. This is the first time that I'm doing it, and I think one of the things that attracted me about Wavecrest was just being able to have somebody who has done it professionally, because there's a difference
Yes.
between running your company as a family run business where you're running your car insurance and buying cars on the company, and that's if you're going to be a family owned business, that's totally fine to do. But I think I wanted to see, how do we run a professional run company where we have kind of a world-class CFO, world-class CTO, world-class CPO. How do we get all of these people working at Starista? And kind of we have found a team of, especially in the senior leadership side, of people that have built companies and have kind of been part of exits. So I wanted to kind of see, can we take this, what I have built, and supercharge this? So, and we have been able to do that very successfully. And also, I think part of it is also
And how did the funding or the help from Wavecrest help you do that? Because you might have done that as a bootstrapper,
right.
right? Got some help to go figure out
Yeah.
how to hire these people, but maybe the funding helped you hire the right people, or maybe the Wavecrest team, as they do, figure out how to
Yeah.
settle the business into a scalable thing and hire the right people in the right spots for that. How did they help?
Yeah, so I think it's, like, hard to, tell at this point whether or not, we're certainly generating enough profitability where at this point, yes, would
Yeah.
we need anybody? Probably not. But I think the time we raised capital was, actually at the beginning of COVID, so there was certainly uncertainty in the
Yes.
marketplace. And I'll tell you, our top
Okay.
2 clients at
Yeah.
the time was a health and fitness chain, so a gym, one of the largest gym chains that,
Yeah.
the revenue went to 0 overnight, and our second biggest was a haircut salon chain where also the revenue went to 0. So, I think, it was,
Mhm.
partially, we have to look back in 2020, and there was, reasons to think that we would not have had the capital to do the M&A that we needed to or wanted to do at that moment.
Okay.
But I think the bigger part of it is
Okay.
to just decide one day, hey, we're going to hire these professional outfits. When you are a small company that's been bootstrapped and you're saying, hey, we're going to bring in a CRO and pay him $250,000, that's kind of like a not something most people would just wake up and decide to do, because I've been in their shoes and you're counting every penny. So I think understanding what I
Yeah,
think,
of course.
have learned from kind of having a professional org like Wavecrest is, you sometimes have to spend money to bring in these talent with the hopes
Yeah.
of elevating things. And that's and it's simple things that forces you to do. So, for example, the board reporting we do monthly, it's
Yes.
just
All of
not
that discipline.
something. Yeah, and it was like, after I did the deal, I was like, "What have I gotten myself into? This is, uh"
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, what do you
Well,
mean
now
that
you're a much bigger company.
Right,
Now you're a
exactly.
much bigger company and you're still acquiring. So you're planning to make this an even bigger company
Right, yeah.
at this
So
point,
our
right?
goal is to kind of, bring in another investor at some point. Wavecrest has, been a great
Okay.
partner, and we'll probably raise another round in the next year or 2 to do even kind of a bigger acquisition to kind of, uh, it's kind of a second wave of supersizing and supercharging the company, so
Yeah, yeah. So now you actually understand the game, the foundation building, the business model, acquiring and growing, and you could see now you understand that game. You could acquire and grow more, is what you just said.
exactly. Yep. Yeah. And that's definitely a good
Okay.
strategy for companies as well. I think, having a good CFO is a must, which we are fortunate to have. And then, uh,
Yeah.
also, one of the close things we do with Wavecrest is we have a bi-monthly meeting on targets that we want to go after. So some of them they're cold calling and bringing to the table. Some
Okay.
of us our guys are going after, and some of them are
Of
people
course.
that provide us services. So it's a process in terms of how you find the right fit and the company, but I do think it's often
Yeah.
overlooked in terms of doing acquisition to grow.
Can I ask you about how you're doing acquisitions these days? If you're a big public company, right? You can buy companies with your stock and
Right.
right, or cash, and there's a whole currency for that, and
Right.
if your multiple EBITDA multiple is higher than, who you're acquiring, you get leverage out of that.
Right.
But you're bootstrapped and profitable, and you don't have hundreds of millions at your disposal.
Right.
Are you doing small acquisitions and Wavecrest gives you some funding for that, or you're funding it out of cash? You're doing some creative
Yeah.
earnouts? I don't know. How are you generally doing this,
Yeah.
efficiently?
Good question. So, we have identified there's a type of business that we like to acquire. Usually, these are founder run companies. Usually, it's an older founder
Of
that's
course.
looking to retire. Almost 90% of them we have worked with in some capacity. So, there's a trust factor because the founder wants to retire and they're looking for kind of a nice home for their employees. So oftentimes that's
Of
a
course,
very
right,
important part
yeah.
of it. And then the other thing we have found is oftentimes these founders are tired. So some of them actually end up working with us for a couple of years afterwards because now they have the freedom to actually go out and maybe sell. A lot of them were, sellers that ended up building these
Yeah,
nice
of course,
small
mhm,
businesses, right? But they were so
and they
bogged down.
created a factory and they had to run the factory, yes,
Yeah, but they got bogged down
yeah,
by payroll and leases and all those things that we kind of free them from and give them the ability to go out and sell and make new relationships for us. But I think knowing what the type of company you're going after is important. For us, it's that founder run companies because
yeah,
ultimately, I think. As a founder and CEO myself, it's an easy conversation to have and also gives them kind of, and we have a track record where we have kept on most of the employees as well,
oh,
so they realize it's not just somebody coming in to gut the company down to the bones and just for
right.
profit. So
So you realize it's a superpower that you're the one that actually wants to get big, that can integrate and acquire
right,
assets for the people who don't wanna get big, right?
right,
You're the one
yep,
who's going big,
yeah,
who's a good guy in a good home, it's not
right,
putting it on the private equity pile or selling to the
right.
trillion-dollar, you know, data companies and so forth, so that's really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you're becoming the roll-up acquirer, if you will, kind of in your space, and, without too much funding. I mean, are you doing this with partial cash and partial earn-out and,
Yeah,
it's
so
kind of a
almost
time thing? Yeah,
every deal we do has some sort of an earnout component to it.
yeah,
I think it's a good way of doing deals because it ensures a smooth transition and handover. And then occasionally, if there are key employees where there is a stock component given as well, where we
Yeah.
feel somebody is going to stay with us and grow with us, that's certainly an incentive we can offer as well. But yeah, it's a mixture of kind of earn out and cash. We typically don't. And look, we're fortunate at this point where we are generating enough EBITDA where we can do some of these deals on cash only basis as well.
Okay. So you're not playing the debt game, one of parts of the private equity roll up playbook,
Right.
right? Or yeah, right.
Yeah,
Very
and I
interesting.
should mention, not that there's anything wrong with debt, but I think most people in our board and industry know I am not I'm not very debt friendly, so
Yeah.
we try to avoid debt. And my father was a banker for many years, and and even he has told me if you can avoid debt, you should. So I've always taken his advice on it. So
Yeah. Well, debt has gotten pretty wicked in Silicon Valley. The venture debt on top of the
yep,
old venture funding and the private equity debt, right? It comes
right,
calling.
yep,
If something happens, if another COVID happens, you
yeah.
put your company at risk, that kind of thing here. So that's really interesting. So you're going to keep running this and running it from San Antonio? Like that's a little bit off the beaten path. Does it matter where you and your team are?
I think over a period of time, it has stopped mattering where you are. I think,
Good.
I mean, COVID made that huge change. Now, I think, San Antonio is a great place to run a business from. There's not that many MarTech companies, hardly any marketing companies,
Yeah.
which is, I view it as a positive because we can really hire the best talents coming out of colleges here.
Yeah.
If they want to work in MarTech or ad tech, we are kind of the option. So we've picked up very talented young people, and we have created a very robust internship program as well to kind of keep bringing in, funneling in new talent. But yeah, for us, San Antonio is kind of our HQ and the home base. We do have a fairly decent New York presence now as well.
Oh, I bet.
And I think overall, it's a very kind of business friendly climate
Yeah.
here. So San
Well,
Antonio is a big part of what Starista is today.
it's also a bootstrap friendly. It's not as expensive as
Yes.
Austin and, the people aren't as expensive.
Right.
And I've been there with $100 million companies. What you've got when you have an ambition to keep going and acquiring and build up and do more and keep up and keep pivoting is you have an opportunity to hire great talent, start them as interns and frontline, and they have a lot of room to grow. You have an opportunity factory that allows you to, attract great talent. So if you stop growing or sell it off, right, the opportunity factory stops. But something
Right.
that says, I'm going to keep making this bigger and you could play the big game. I bet you're hiring great talent from all over.
Yep, absolutely. I think the key is, I mean, it's the way I look at it, we call them Starista originals. So we have
Yeah.
a lot of people that started their careers here, or this was their second job.
Yeah.
And then we kind
Yeah.
of blend that in with people that have worked at larger companies that have had exits. So I like to have kind of a blend, but if we don't kind of nurture our own talent, to me, we kind of lose our identity in terms of who we are.
Of course, I'm sure you're using AI across your company, inside your company, and so forth. Does the AI shift, whether it's agents or
Yeah.
MCPs or data providers or, anything else, is that just part of the changing digital marketing landscape? Is there anything, I guess there's something different about it, but is it just another technology shift or is there something bigger going on in MarTech?
I think uh, my son just turned 13, and I gave him access to the Gemini, which is our kind of version of AI that we use. And the way he's been using it, it's kind of fascinating. We were just in Europe last month, and he really wanted to plan out what we should do. And I could tell he had used Gemini because he had forgotten to change the font and stuff
Yeah.
to plan out the family itinerary. So I think it's just, there's a generation like my kids that are born with a cell phone and iPad in their hands. And I think to me, that's the logical extension AI, where
Mhm.
people are used to having answers quickly and right on their fingertips.
Mhm.
And we have a whole generation growing up that way. And we also have, if you kind of think about salespeople or internal resources that want answers. And historically, no matter how fast when I
Mhm.
started the company, one of the cool things we said was, the big companies take, sometimes 3, 4 days to answer basic data requests. We'll do it in 48 hours, and people were very happy with that. Like 48 hours, this is great. Unfortunately, now you need to answer that within 48 seconds. And this is where a lot of the AI agents come into play, right? So I think it's just, to me, a lot of the solutions that we're building is just how do you do things faster? Who can do it faster? Who can answer faster? So what we're doing is similar in terms of using AI to expedite a lot of these things, both
Yeah.
internally, but as well as for clients. A lot of our tools in the last couple of years have just been help desk agents that are answering questions faster. So we used to have like a human sales fact channel that is being monitored by a beautiful AI agent now. And if the chat agent fails, then somebody from product is answering. But we also see a lot of young people now who are not coders, who didn't know a line of coding, are using tools like Cursor to build out very robust platforms that,
Interesting.
historically would have required months of work and data
Inside
analysis.
your clients, inside their businesses, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
So I think, we are definitely of the mindset of, encouraging people, anyone at Starista who wants to kind of, learn AI, we're, paying for them to take courses, classes,
Yeah.
etcetera. But yeah, I do think it's a different world, and as kind of these teenagers come into workforce, now you have a generation that has never not known what it's like to have an iPad in your hands, and they'll want answers and they'll want to do things. Similarly, these people are going to be buying media, and they don't know what it's like to wait to execute a campaign. So
Half the people do it. So that's amazing. Well, what an amazing company, right? It's already scaled up and you're getting bigger with bootstrap roots and now this prudent growth equity and acquisition, right? Playing the long game and turning into one of the big guys yourself. So that's very exciting, Ajay.
thank you. Yeah, it's I think probably you asked earlier why not sell it. I think the most important thing is having the passion to do it and still feeling excited about it
Of course.
every day. And I think it's sounds somewhat like a cliche, but I think being excited. Last week, I did a happy hour with 6 of our younger employees that I didn't know well, and just hearing what they're going through, hearing about their experiences, Starista, things they have learned. Those are the kind of things that I still get excited about and happy about, and
Yeah.
always pick up something new talking from them. Hey, we need to improve this or change that. So,
Well, it sounds a little trite, right? But, you don't have to do this. You could sell it any time and do well. So, like, you have a
yeah,
choice. You've earned the
exactly.
right, and
Yeah.
it's very exciting. So, thanks again for being on the Practical Founders, podcast, Ajay, and to tell the story of Starista, and, wish you the best of, luck as you continue to expand and play on the front lines of the latest and greatest in marketing technology.
Thank you, Greg. It's been a great conversation. Thanks for making it flow so smoothly and easily.
Thank you. Thanks for watching this week's interview on the Practical Founders podcast. Be sure to like this episode and subscribe to the Practical Founders YouTube channel to keep up with my weekly in-depth interviews with serious software founders who are building valuable software companies without big funding. You can check out my blog, all the podcast episodes and information about my Practical Founders CEO peer groups at practicalfounders.com, or message me on LinkedIn if you'd like to connect. See you next week.